Hi everyone, it's Miss Chelsea with the Mount Holly Branch Library, and today I have an SFX Makeup for Beginners, and that is Special Effects Makeup. So I just want to start off by saying I am not a professional SFX makeup artist. I am not an expert. These are just some tips and tricks that I have learned along the way. We're going to go over some safety precautions to take, some DIYs, and then a couple very short videos of some wounds that I created. So let's get spooky. So first and foremost, be safe. We want fake injuries, not real ones. So be safe with your skin and the products that you use. Always check the ingredients, especially if you are very prone to skin allergies or if you have sensitive skin. Also be nice to your skin. When you apply or remove any special effects makeup or prosthetics, be gentle on your skin. Make sure that you clean your skin well before and after you put your fake wound on. Another one is do not use any type of SFX makeup around your eyes or your mouth. I know that there's plenty of people who do tutorials with this online. Most of those are professionals. They know what they're doing, they know what they're using. If you are just starting off on this or if you don't have that much experience, this is very risky and very dangerous. There are also a lot of videos online where they show, there's one in particular, they show torn skin, it's fake torn skin around the eyes. Don't do that if starting off because you're risking putting a lot of fake blood, glue, latex, or scar wax around your eye, and that's just risking damaging your eyes. Just because there's a video out there that has, 1 million views, hundreds of thousands of followers, does not mean that they are professionals. Make sure that who you are following is a professional. They have a lot of experience in this because they will tell you themselves. If you are a beginner, do not try that yourself. Keep your wounds around areas that cannot go inside of your body. So another thing going off that is to never put in contact lenses without speaking to an optometrist first. I know a lot of SFX tutorials, they have blackout contacts or they have the whiteout contacts and it just really pulls a look together. However, if you've never worn contact lenses, go to an optometrist, make an appointment, get some advice for them. They may even know a couple areas or places where you could buy them safely instead of just ordering them online. They'll talk you through how to clean them and how just to be safe with them. Also, do not stick any non-dental approved materials in your mouth. I actually watched a video where someone had bought fake teeth that you can buy at any Halloween store or even a dollar store, and it's all fine, but then they spray painted them black. Spray paint is toxic. You do not want to put that in your mouth. Another one is to be cautious when creating your wound. If you are trying to create torn or cut skin, avoid using scissors or a knife to cut the fake skin because then you're going to risk cutting your real skin. Tweezers is a really good alternative. If you're just very steady with your hand, you could even just try to pick it apart with your fingers. But again, starting off, don't use scissors or knives to cut through a fake skin. If you plan to use a prosthetic on your skin, clean it first, just a little warm water and just a tiny bit of soap, and then make sure that it is dry completely. If you don't dry it completely, then it's more than likely not going to adhere to your skin very well. So, we are going to make some fake blood, and for this you are going to need some Cara syrup, some red and blue liquid or gel food coloring. For the one that I used gel because that's all I could find. I prefer liquid, but again, you'll see what I made later and gel worked perfectly fine. You're going to need a bowl and either a spoon or a fork. Some optional items that are advised but not necessary are cocoa powder, cornstarch, Vaseline or petroleum jelly, gelatin, clear glue, tissue, or a cotton ball. So first you're going to add your Cara syrup and your red liquid or gel food coloring to a bowl. You're going to mix them together using a downward, if you're using the liquid food coloring, use a downward motion with your spoon or your fork to better mix the food coloring into the syrup, because if not, it's just going to slosh around and the syrup's going to have a hard time mixing it together. Once you get a good amount of red in there, add 1 drop of either blue or just a tiny bit of blue gel food coloring because blue will go a long way. Once you get done with that point, you can experiment if you want. If you want to add a small bit of yellow or green just to try to darken your color or see what else you can get. If you do use the gel food coloring, I put a little bit of water in mine just to sort of make it a bit more runnier because it was still very syrupy and a bit too thick for me at first. So once you think that you're good, go ahead and get a napkin, a paper towel, something that's disposable, and just swipe the color on there. As you can see at the bottom, I have one that is a bit more brownish in color, and then on the other side, I have one that's just a bit more bright. There is a reason for this. Wounds are different. You can either have an old wound or you can have a fresh wound. An old wound, the blood's more than likely going to be both darker and thicker in texture. It's going to be darker in color. A fresh wound, it may run a bit more freely. It might be brighter because it's just happened. So swipe a bit of your blood onto a napkin or paper towel to see if it's where it's at. Now with the brighter, I had a little bit of transparency. It was kind of see-through. If you have that problem, you can either add a little bit of cocoa powder or a little bit of cornstarch. Cocoa powder is going to darken it a little bit. Cornstarch will keep it a light, bright color. So again, think about the wound that you're creating, what's the story behind it, and just keep it cohesive. So once you get done with that, the color looks good. If you just take a small amount of that and just sort of rub it on your arm or your hand, if it starts to bead up, like if you were to take a marker and rub it against something that has a glossy finish, you know how sometimes it beads up. If that happens, just take a drop or two of dish soap to the bowl and mix that together, and then that'll take care of that problem. So again, this is get creative with this. What is the story that's behind your fake wound? If you need more of a gelled or coagulated look, try using a little bit of Vaseline or some clear glue or gelatin. And if you want to add texture into your wound, just pull a few strands from a cotton ball or tissue paper and just mix it up in the blood. And it'll look very coagulated and just sort of give it like some muscly or fatty tissue texture. All right, so next is scar wax. If you've never heard of scar wax is used to alter the shape of a feature like your nose or your finger or your chin. It can, however, also be used to create fake wounds. It looks and has a texture of like a doughy skin. The one that I'm going to talk to you about making at home is a DIY version. DIY versions are not meant to last for very long. I would not depend on that to last for more than maybe 2 or 3 hours. So for this, you are going to need some Vaseline or petroleum jelly, some flour, a bowl, and either a makeup spatula or a butter knife. So if you look in the picture, that is what the scar wax will look like when it's complete. It just looks like a small ball of dough. So in a bowl, you're going to mix about a couple tablespoons of Vaseline and some flour. And when I say flour or some flour, I mean a lot of flour. It is going to take more than you need. So just add it in spoonful by spoonful as you mix. This is very important. Do not mix this with your hands. It is going to be very messy if you try to do that. And it is going to stick to everything. So use a makeup spatula or a butter knife. Next, keep mixing. Seriously, it is going to take a few minutes. So get comfortable and be patient and just constantly keep mixing and test it as you go. So when you test it, if your texture is too sticky, when you pull off a small piece and you sort of roll it around in your hand just to test it, if it's sticking to your fingers and to your hands, then you need to add some more flour. If you pull off a small piece and you start to roll it around and it starts falling apart, or it's very crumbly, or it's leaving a lot of flour on your hands, add a little more Vaseline. If you roll it around your hands and it feels like dough, it's malleable, you can move it, you can shape it, it's not sticking, there's no residue on your hands, it is ready to go. Making a wound. These are the 2 wounds that I created. Most fake wounds are made from liquid latex or scar wax and or prosthetics. For a DIY liquid latex, you can use Elmer's school glue or school glue such as Elmer's. It needs to be the liquid, and layer it with 1-ply tissue paper. Again, if you have tissue paper, it's more than likely 2-ply, so just separate those 2 apart. Just be gentle because it'll tear easy. So the one at the top was actually made with scar wax, and the one on the bottom was with the liquid glue and tissue paper. And I will say the Scar Wax recipe did turn out very nice because it does spread well on the skin. It took me a little while to sort of get the shape that I wanted and to smooth it out, but it was a lot easier to smooth out than the glue and the tissue paper, and just to sort of hide those edges a little bit. If you ever do use Scar Wax, I would use some type of skin adhesive like a liquid latex, spirit gum, or even lash glue. I actually used lash glue. I found it at the dollar store, so that worked out perfectly. So this is the cut that I made with Scar Wax. So I just got a small amount. You do not need a lot because you do not want this to rise too much above the skin. You want it to sort of be smooth along with the skin. And at this point, I'm just pressing it down, trying to get those edges as thin as I possibly can, and just to form the shape that I wanted. I knew that this was going to be a cut. I didn't want it to be too big because I wanted it to be very realistic. But as you can see, it does need to be pushed down a lot, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just pushing and flattening it down because you don't want it raised up too high, because then it's just going to look unrealistic and you don't want that for your look. So I'm just patting it down. I noticed it started to stick a little bit. If yours does start to stick, you can just put a little bit of flour on your finger and go over it and just keep pushing and smoothing down those edges. And you can see like the ends of the edges almost completely blend in with the skin. So when I cover that with makeup, it's actually going to take care of a lot of that. And if you have any at the ends like you see me doing there, you can just rub that off. So that is it completely put down and blended in the best that I could get. And I'm just taking some very pale concealer because the arm that I was doing this on is pretty pale. And I'm just tapping that all around the wound, and I'm just using a sponge to blend that in. Make sure that if you use makeup like concealer or foundation and you're using a sponge, to tap it, do not rub, because then you're just going to rub that Scar Wax completely off of there. So that's why I'm just doing these dabbing, tapping motions. Now I'm taking some translucent face powder, and I'm just going over that just to sort of make sure that it doesn't become too sticky. It dries, it helps blend that color a little bit better. And right now, because I've smoothed out the top of it so well and I've made it a little more flat, it kind of just looks like a little bit of a bruise, like if you've ever fallen down and gotten a knot on your arm. So that was a part of this that I didn't even think about creating, but that's just the way it turned out. So I'm just dusting off the excess and putting a little bit more concealer. So for this, I had a to-go plastic knife and I just barely grazed the top. You do not want to go too deep. You don't want, if you feel your real skin, you probably went a little too far. So just barely graze the top. And I took some very dark burgundy eyeshadow in a small brush, and I'm just sort of trying to hold open the wound a little bit so I can get down in there really good. And I took some red lipstick just to give it that bright pop of red that I wanted, because this is supposed to be a fresh cut. And I'm just sort of dabbing that all around the edges and inside of the wound. So now I'm going in with my fake blood that I made. This is the brighter color because, like I said, this is a fresh cut. So I want some bright red blood coming out of it. And I'm just putting this on the inside of the cut. If you spend so much time creating a really nice SFX or makeup look and you cover the entire thing with fake blood, you just wasted all that hard work, because no one's going to be able to see it anymore. All they're going to see is just a pool of fake blood. So I'm going around with some dark pink eyeshadow mixed with a little bit of the fake blood just to inflame those edges and kind of make it look like the blood spread a little bit. I did mess up and put too much, so you can see me fixing it right here, just trying to take some of that color away. I do wish I would have spent some more time on the edges. That was the one other thing that I think I didn't like as much. If you have a problem with skin or scar wax and edges, Elmer's glue will take care of that, and I'll show you how in the next video. All right, so this is the opened wound with glue and tissue paper. And again, I used Elmer's glue, and as long as it is a liquid school glue, it should be fine. So I actually forgot to start hitting record with this video. I'm sorry. But what I did real quick was I put down a very, very, very thin layer of school glue over the size of the wound that I want, and then I laid one layer of that tissue paper down. And then I did that 4 times. So I had 4 layers of tissue paper, and then I covered it with another thin layer of glue, and I let that dry for a minute, and now I'm just tearing off that excess, and I'm going to go ahead and cover it in some more of that translucent face powder just to keep it nice and dry. And I'm just going to color it with the concealer just to try to get it to match the skin tone a little bit better, and then some more face powder. So I used my nails and just sort of tried to pick at it a little bit just to pull it up. I knew that this was going to be a bigger wound, and I kind of wanted it to look like a little bit of a gash. I tried to use the end of the butter knife, the handle part, just to pull it away from the skin. Be very careful with this part because it can tear. And so now here's my makeup brush. I'm going in with some burgundies, some purples, some reds, and I'm just randomly dabbing that in there to create a depth and textured effect with it. And just trying to get as close to that crease on the inside and up on that fake skin flap that is up there, and just towards the torn part on the edge. And I'm back in there with my bright red lipstick. I really like the color of it, and I think that's why I kept using it. It's just a very bright red, and I didn't have an eyeshadow that was that vivid. So I was glad that I had that. So I'm just going back in there and just trying to get as much as I can. I took my makeup brush and just sort of dusted the outside and just all around the edges with some pink and just a tiny bit of red, just to try to give it that inflamed, aggravated skin look, because this is a pretty big wound. I will say I was not crazy about the shape. I kind of wanted it bigger, so I started tearing it a little bit more and started just to color in where I just torn it. I wasn't super crazy about all the pink and the red on the outside, so I decided to turn this into a bruise and just took some oranges, golds, browns, and just randomly went all around the edges and ran into my biggest mistake and problem that I had. I had forgot to lay down the Elmer's glue on the edges before putting down that dark brown color. So now those edges stick out like a sore thumb. So you can very clearly see them. I was not happy. I had to go back in with my concealer just to lighten them back up. And then here's me putting down the glue. So you're just going to just a very small amount on the edge and then just tap it down, push it out to cover those edges, and it'll help them from standing out so much. I will say this is not a perfect look. I could not keep the tissue paper and the glue from wrinkling. That's why it looks like old wrinkled skin. So since I couldn't help that, I definitely wanted to make sure the edges they just looked a bit cleaner and nicer than what they had done. So while the glue dries, I took some strands of a cotton ball to lay it inside the wound. If you cut your arm open that big, it's not going to be completely smooth like the top of your arm is now. So you're going to have some muscle and some fatty tissue in there like that. And that's what I wanted to achieve with the cotton balls. So I'm just mixing it up in some of the fake blood. And once it's coated pretty well, I'll start spreading them out and getting the place where I want to place. You can also use tissue paper for this. If you would rather not use either of those, you could just mix up a little bit of gelatin. I've heard some people even use toothpaste or petroleum jelly, and it'll give you like more of a congealed feel to the blood. You can just add those in there. I just like the cotton balls because it just gave it that stringy, just gross factor to it. So I'm just putting some on those edges of those tears, some more fake blood. You're noticing here, even though this is a bigger wound, I'm not covering it in fake blood. Don't do that. You just worked so hard on that. Don't cover it all up. So we're just going to just let it drip down a little bit, but we're not covering it. Now that my glue's dried, I'm going to go back in there and try that bruise again, and it looks so much better. I can barely see the edges this time. So I'm just going around with some dark brown, some orange golds, and a good amount of purple just to keep it dark. And I'm using another separate brush just to blend all that out. And then I'm just going to open it up so now you can see the inside, and you are good to go. That was it for that one. Remember, this is supposed to be fun, so if you get to a point to where you're aggravated, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes when they start off. I have done this as a hobby for a while now, and you can still see I made a mistake in my video. So it is okay. Just have fun with it. Be creative, but make sure your wound is cohesive. So if you have an older wound, you may have some scabbing, some old dry blood. The blood may be darker, maybe a little congealed. If your wound is very fresh, use some brighter blood, some brighter colors. Don't use black pigment as a base for an open wound. I meant to mention this earlier. I've seen a lot of videos where people, as soon as they have an open wound, the first color they go for is they put down a black base. To me, that is very unrealistic. Go for some dark burgundies, for some purples, for some reds, for a little bit of pink if it's a fresher wound. Don't go straight in for black because unless you're a zombie and your skin is rotting off and turning black, the inside of your arm won't be black. So keep it realistic. Some reds, even if it's dark reds, some light reds, things like that. And most importantly, always, always, always be safe. So once you're done, go show off all your hard work. Send us a picture at the Mount Holly Library so we can see what you've done. And over time, the more practice and the more experience and knowledge that you gain, the better your fake injuries are going to look. So have fun, and we'll see you next time. Bye.